like evolutionary, you know?
Wow, that sounds great.
Yeah.
I'm super excited about it.
Yeah.
That's all.
Nice meeting you. Yeah, take care.
We have a couple minutes of business.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, welcome everyone. I have a hoarse throat, so I won't be. It's not. Try this one. How's this one? Could somebody turn the volume up just a little bit for me? John? Volume on number 3. 3. Better? Better? Yes? Okay, thank you. So my apologies. I'm just finishing up a cold. It's in its last stages. I'm feeling fine, but my voice is not. Welcome to our February meeting. We are delighted to have a speaker all the way from Sacramento that's come down to join us, Chris Bonds. You'll hear more about him in a minute. But before we start the program, our usual time for some announcements. I'm going to, as I promised you, keep making the same announcement until I get this taken care of. I still need a secretary and the inimitable Will Schweller over here on the beverages committee. That's right. So please know willing to serve in either of those capacities. Neither one of them is that onerous a job, and it can be fun to get to know everybody. So, okay. Who else has announcements? I know, Paul, you have one? Come on up to the microphone, please. And the rest of you are on warning. You come up here to make your announcement.
Because we want it recorded. Back in the corner, there is a plethora. I think that's a real word. Which one? This one?
Gray one.
The gray one. Okay. There are books in the back corner and maps and charts and maybe some stuff that I shouldn't have put out from Chevron. I didn't say that, Don. Take them. We're trying to get them out of our garages, basements, etc. And it would be great if you also then say, okay, this is worth a couple bucks, and then a couple of bucks in a bucket over there for the NCGS. Okay. And Phil's getting tired of bringing them in and not enough people taking them. And I'm just starting, and pretty soon everyone will be bringing books in. So go grab them. Good books.
2 boxes aren't coming back.
Okay.
I got about 3 more boxes at home. 12 or 15 I had donated to the Work Association, so we're going through them gradually, but we're down to the ones that you guys don't like.
Yeah. Hydrology. I mean, what the hell is that?
It's more and more important. We're going to hear more about that tonight, I'm sure. Okay, let's see. Greg Croft, I know you had an announcement. Come on up.
Hello, just wanted to announce that this coming weekend is the Gem and Mineral show for the Castro Valley Gem and Mineral Society. The show is not in Castro Valley, it's in Newark at the Newark Pavilion. But we will have 3 buildings full of gem and mineral dealers. There will be a whole series of display cases, including a very informative display on jade in California. There will be let's see, it's 3 days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Friday is free admission for anyone 62 and over, which might be of interest to some people in this group. And of course, all days, Newark Pavilion's free parking, which is a plus compared to, say, Alameda County Fairgrounds. So we get a pretty good collection of mostly local area dealers, but we do get some people that do rare and exotic gemstones. We also have a lot of Afghan dealers, so we have a lot of good material, tourmaline, aquamarine types of materials that come from Afghanistan. And I have a couple of flyers here. It's admission, like I say, it's free for anybody over 62 on Friday. It's $6 on Saturday or Sunday, $10 for the full 3 days, but you get $1 off of that.
I'm just going to pass them around. Is that it, Greg? Okay. Anybody else with an announcement? Where'd Mr. Schweller go? Hey, Will, are you out there? Gonna ask if he had anything to say about field trips coming up. Not sensing it, so I'm gonna turn the floor over to Greg Bartow, who's our program. He's gonna introduce our speaker, Chris Bonds. Oh, you have an announcement. Come on up.
Oh, I think all of you remember this volume. And how many of you are Geological Society of America members? Oh, great. If you want now, you can get it's discounted for members in October. The member price is now $30 if you're a member. However, if you're an author and or an editor, I understand there's an additional 25% discount and or for members, but additional 50% for authors. And I think it also applies to editors. So I picked up 4 volumes for 25 bucks. And there's just a shipping fee. It doesn't matter how many books you get of $5. And it comes UPS within a couple days. But you have to call in. Don't go online to order. You need to call in and talk to a human being. So, and they can help you out if you're interested in getting additional books. Pardon? It includes the map. Yep, on the back.
Thank you. It's obviously not making any money off a bill. This is in fact why we raised money to help defray the cost of the volume, because they know they're not going to sell enough of these specialty volumes to cover their costs. So yeah, gives me a chance to thank the membership again for your generous donations to help make this possible. It was great. Okay, let's go on to the program. Greg?
Okay, good evening, everybody. And again, I'm Greg Bartow. I'm part of the program committee along with John Karachewski and Paul Henshaw. And so we're pleased to have Chris Bonds here tonight to talk about the California Aqueduct Subsidence Program. Chris is a senior engineering geologist with the California Department of Water Resources in Sacramento. Since 2001, he has been involved in a variety of statewide projects, including exploration, monitoring, modeling, policy, research, water transfers, and emergency response. Chris has over 31 years of professional experience in paleontology, geophysics, environmental geology, and he's worked in California, Alaska, and Hawaii. Chris holds a master's in geology from Cal State LA. He's a professional geologist and a certified hydrogeologist. And Chris co-authored a paper in the Association of Engineering Geologists publication on geology of cities of the world. This was on Sacramento, and that book takes the greater Sacramento area. And speaking of deals, AEG has that posted on their website. You can download it for free. It's about 300 or 400 pages. It's a huge document, but it's nice that that's available for the public at no cost. So with that, please give a round of applause and welcome Chris.
Uh-oh. What's the other button? That's what happened before. We had that problem earlier. Let's see if it works over here.
Let's get a couple slides in before I leave.
Now it's working. All right. I think it's working now. Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm happy to. Oh, this one or this one. How's that? Better? Yeah. All right. All right. How's that? Is that better? Good. All right. So yeah, happy to be here tonight with you folks. I'm glad you're able to make it tonight. Again, my name's Chris Bonds. I'm a geologist with the California Department of Water Resources in Sacramento. And I've been working on this particular project for about the last 9 months or so. And this is a long-term program that's been going on with the department. It's just started a couple of years ago, but it's going to be going on for literally decades into the future because of the fact that Aqueduct is in operation and will continue to be in operation for decades to come. So so basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk towards the end of the presentation. I will talk about the actual program and get into the details, but I wanted to start off just to make sure everyone is aware of land subsidence and talk about land subsidence in California, and then I will transition about halfway through into the program itself. There we go. So again, talk overview. I'll start off with some land subsidence 101. I'll talk about the California State Water Project. Then we'll go into the California Acqueduct Subsidence studies that occurred in 2017 through 2019. Then I'll get into the California Aqueduct Subsidence Program, otherwise known as CASP. And we'll talk a little bit about, I'll give you an example of one of the rehab projects that we're working on. And then we'll go into the groundwater monitoring project component of the program. And lastly, the subsidence and groundwater modeling project. And then I'll wrap up with where it's headed after that. So for those of you that aren't super familiar with land subsidence, what is land subsidence? Basically, the gradual settling or sudden sinking of the Earth's surface due to the subsurface movement of Earth materials. And it is a global problem. And in the US, more than 17,000 square miles in 45 states, an area roughly the size of New Hampshire and Vermont combined, have been directly affected by subsidence. So what are some of the causes? Collapse of underground cavities, typically in mining areas and in areas underlain by limestone deposits, which are soluble. Also, tectonic activity due to earthquakes is another cause of land subsidence. And then this one right here is important with respect to the California Aqueduct hydrocompaction. Oops. This one right here, hydrocompaction. This is due to moisture deficient alluvial fan and aeolian deposits, primarily along the western San Joaquin Valley. And then in the California Delta, we have a significant amount of peat. And when the peat is oxidized over the course of history from when it started to become reclaimed in the 1800s through the middle 1900s, as the peat was drained and it started to become oxidized, it started to subside. So in the Delta, we've got areas of the Delta that have subsided 20 to 30 feet, which is pretty remarkable. And then another example is hydrocarbon extraction. And this is a classic example from Southern California, the Long Beach area. This is the Wilmington oil field on the right here. And this is an area that in the early 1900s, 1920s, I believe, they had significant land subsidence that was occurring right there at the coastline, and they determined that the oil extraction in that area was causing the land subsidence. And in this particular area, they had, right along the coast, they had up to 29 feet of land subsidence. So it was a significant impact to that area. However, the groundwater pumping and the extensive water level declines are responsible for most of the land subsidence in California. And so here's a little diagram right here. Basically, when you have the groundwater level drop in your groundwater basin, you have basically dewatering and or depressurizing of the different layers. And when you depressurize the fine grained materials in the aquifer, which are typically the majority of the groundwater system is a fine grained material, when you depressurize that, you cause the pore pressure in the fine grained materials to drop, and basically the clays, basically they're kind of like dinner plates, and basically when they're full of water and happy, basically they're all spread out like this. And then as soon as the pore pressure depressurizes, basically the clays reorient themselves into a more like dinner plate arrangement. So basically they go from this arrangement right here to this arrangement. So basically the fine grained materials compact, and that's where you have your what's called inelastic land subsidence occurs. So this, land subsidence is a pretty complex phenomena. So I like to use this analogy here to help kind of explain what's going on. So basically, here you have a gentleman standing in a pool of water. Oops. Standing in a pool of water, and he's standing on a scale, and he weighs, this amount right here, and it's the pool. Whoops, sorry. The pool is full of water. So basically what happens is when the water level drops, he's standing on that same scale. He weighs a lot more on that scale. So it's kind of there's a buoyancy effect that that occurs. And the stress, due to the decrease in buoyancy, causes the fine grained portions of the groundwater system to compact. So what are some of the impacts? So some of the impacts include loss of conveyance capacity in canals, streams, and rivers, and flood bypass channels, diminished effectiveness of levees, in this case, I'm talking about conveyance capacity, so using a canal to move water, to convey the water. So, the third bullet there, damage to roads, bridges, building foundations, pipelines, and wells. And the last one there is development of earth fissures, which can damage structures. So how is subsidence monitored? There's a number of different ways that it's been done. Historically, baseline and repeat benchmark surveys, kind of traditional surveying, historic surveying. And then now in more modern times, we've transitioned to GPS baseline and continuous surveys using digital equipment. And then we have extensometers, which are, we have a number of them in California, in the Central Valley, and there's actually a few in the Bay Area too. And then over the last probably 20 or so years, we've started using what's called INSAR. It's interferometric synthetic aperture radar, INSAR. And this is on airborne or satellite-based systems. And basically, you can do repeat surveys over a certain area, and you can basically see what the difference in elevation of your survey area is over time. So you can actually have a repeat survey over a certain area and see how the land is if it's stable, if it's dropping, or if it's rising. So that's a really neat technology that is being used now. That's covers a large area, and cost-wise, it's a nominal cost compared to some of these other methods. So in California, land subsidence has been observed for decades in 17 areas around the state. So the ones I wanted to point out to you is in the Sacramento Valley, over 5 feet of land subsidence has occurred. This is in the southwestern portion of the Sacramento Valley. So from like Woodland, Zamora, Davis area, that area has seen about over 5 feet of land subsidence historically. In the Antelope Valley, which is down here in the Southern California, historically they've seen over 6 feet of land subsidence. And in the Santa Clara Valley, so right here in your neck of the woods, historically we've seen over 13 feet of land subsidence, so right here in the South Bay. And then the granddaddy of them all is the San Joaquin Valley, primarily the western portion of Fresno County, where we've had historically over 29 feet of land subsidence. So this is a neat diagram from Santa Clara Valley Water District that shows a series of graphs. Right here, we've got population increase over time from about 1900 to 2020, went from, you know, a low level of population up to approaching 2 million. Groundwater level is the blue line here. You can see how it started off well above sea level, and then over time quickly dropped down to over 100 feet below sea level. And during that same time frame, the land surface up here dropped from the early 1900s, dropped about 13 feet between 1915 and 1970. So basically, it all has to do with, again, depressurizing the aquifers at depth. And as soon as reservoirs were constructed to capture more local water, and deliveries of imported water from both the state and the federal projects, the groundwater level started to rebound and the land subsidence ceased. And basically since about the 1970s and 1980s, the land subsidence has not gotten any worse. And so basically, again, that's really important because this area is right along the bay, and basically, you know, slight changes in sea level can wreak havoc on your infrastructure and your facilities. So here's a map, Santa Clara Valley. This is a historic map showing land subsidence between 1934 and 1967 in the Santa Clara Valley. And San Jose experienced upwards of 8 feet of land subsidence. And then this area right here, El Viso, had about 5 feet of land subsidence. And this next picture I'm going to show you is El Viso Marina, 1914. You can see the elevation of the land surface relative to the bay. You can see it's right there. And then basically here is another picture, that same spot in 1980. You can see where the level of the canal or the bay is, and where the ground surface is. Significantly, you know, over, in this case, over 5 feet of land subsidence. But you can see the, you know, the levee along the bay is significantly been enhanced in that area because to hold that water back. So in the San Joaquin Valley, in December of 1977, subsidence reached a maximum of about 9 meters or 29 feet in western Fresno County. And more than 5,200 square miles of irrigated land, 1/2 the entire valley, had been affected by subsidence. And the USGS called this the greatest human alteration of the Earth's surface. And this is a classic photo of Dr. Joseph Poland, a USGS researcher on land subsidence. He's standing next to a telephone pole at this particular location, and he's got 3 signs on this pole, on this telephone pole. 1977, that's when the picture was taken. That's the ground surface elevation at the time. 1955, that's where the ground surface was. 1925, that's where the ground surface was. So this is probably one of the most famous pictures taken that really illustrates, and pretty much anybody that looks at this it connects with you because of the fact that we've all seen these telephone poles, and when you put those placards on the pole and you realize that that's where the land surface was, that's just at this location, it really makes you realize how significant of a problem this is. And so this was again, I think one of the most famous geology related pictures ever taken, which is pretty neat. So just to show you examples of what does this subsidence look like. Here's a buckled liner along the Delta Mendota Canal. Here is this is the East Side Bypass, and this is a flood control facility in the middle of the San Joaquin Valley. And in this particular area, we've had up to over 7 feet of land subsidence in this area. And that is basically right here at this little bullseye you see right here. This is the East Side Bypass right here. And this benchmark that Michelle Sneed from USGS is standing at, again, between 1965 and 2013, they were able to measure 7.3 feet of land subsidence. So again, that affects the ability of that facility to convey flood water during significant flood events. So here's some really neat pictures of what are called well protrusions. And this occurs when the land surface subsides around a well. The casing, it looks like it's poking up out of the ground. Basically, the land is subsiding around the well and dropping down, and it's not adhered very well to the casing. So the land drops down and the well appears to pop out of the ground. The well staying at the same position, but the ground surface is dropping. So you can see that here. Oops, see that here. Basically, that's normally where that pipe would connect to, is right there. Here's another example, about 2.5 foot of, this is a monitoring well, 2.5 feet of protrusion. And then here is a production well that is popped up out of the ground about 1 foot. So here's a couple of pictures from a downhole video camera that shows what happens to these wells. Sometimes they protrude out of the ground, and sometimes they actually collapse. If the well was constructed and the cement is secured tightly to the well casing, it will actually compress the casing down. So you get what's called these buckles or compressions. And this is a wire wrap screen that you can see is no longer cylindrical. You can see it's elliptical here. Basically, that is because of the compression. Here you got some start of some compression here on the side, and this is an example of where the casing actually broke. It broke, and basically it's no longer it's no longer completely sealing the well, and basically material outside the well can come in there and cause problems. So another thing that can happen is you can have what are called earth fissures. And this has happened, again, all over California. Here's an example from 1969 in the San Joaquin Valley in the Pixley area. And you can see that's, probably right here, probably 4 or 5 feet of land subsidence in this area. Again, this crack extends for thousands of feet in within the area of subsidence. Here's another one in the Mojave Desert in 1976 in Mesquite Lake, and you can see a gentleman standing in the fissure right here. So it just goes to show you how deep this one is, and you can see it extends for quite a long distance in this area. And then lastly, in the Fremont Valley, which is just north of the Antelope Valley in Southern California, here's another earth fissure, and you can see it extends for an significant distance, and it's fairly deep. So I just wanted to, the first part of the presentation was just to orient you to land subsidence. What are some of the causes? And now I'm going to transition into the main part of the presentation, which is focused on the California Aqueduct Subsidence Program. So I wanted to start off with the California State Water Project. This is the, in this case, this extends from primarily the main reservoir for the California State Water Project is Lake Oroville, which is up in this area. There are 3 upper watershed reservoirs above Lake Oroville: Antelope Lake, Lake Davis, and Frenchman Lake. And after that, the water travels down the Feather River and the Sacramento River down to the Delta. We do have a North Bay Aqueduct that takes water to Napa and the North Bay area, and then it extends down to the Southern Delta. And at that point, it goes to connects to the Bethany Reservoir and goes to the South Bay Aqueduct to Lake Del Valle. And then the California Aqueduct starts at the edge of the Delta and extends all the way down to Lake Paris in Southern California. And that's the terminus of the State Water Project. And then we also have the coastal branch, which extends about halfway down the aqueduct into the coastal area, goes to San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara counties. And then in Southern California, after the aqueduct is, after the water is pumped up over the Tehachapi Mountains about 2,000 feet at a lift station at Edmonston Pumping Plant, it transitions to the southern part of the State Water Project. It goes to the west branch, goes to Pyramid Lake and Castaic Lake. And the east branch goes to San Bernardino, Silverwood Lake, and then again terminates at Lake Paris. So again, the DWR, the agency that I work for, they built the State Water Project to increase statewide water supply reliability and operate the aqueduct. The State Water Project, it's the nation's largest state-built water supply for 27 million Californians and irrigates 750,000 acres of farmland, and also is used for environmental preservation and protection purposes. And the California Aqueduct Subsidence Program, otherwise known as CASP, it's one of several programs underway to help improve the resiliency of California water management systems and to prepare for future needs. So here is a map of the aqueduct. The study area that we're looking at is basically from this area. This is a San Luis Reservoir right here. So basically the study area extends from right here, which is milepost 90, and extends all the way down to the base of the Tehachapi Mountains, which is Edmonston Pumping Plant. And this is down here, it's milepost 290. So about 200 miles of aqueduct is being investigated. And in 2017 and 2019, DWR developed 2 reports to basically evaluate and kind of document the land subsidence that's been occurring along the aqueduct. And we identified 5 subsidence bowls along the length of the aqueduct. The first one here is called the Pinoche Bowl, and this is 1 to 5 feet of land subsidence has occurred there. There's the Los Gatos Bowl, 1 to 6 feet of subsidence, and those are kind of adjacent to each other. And then once you get past the coastal branch right here, we encounter what's called the Kern Bowl. 1 to 4 feet of subsidence is occurring there. And then when you get down towards the Edmonston pumping plant, we have 2 other bowls. These are bowls that weren't previously recognized, and they don't have as much land subsidence, but there is some subsidence occurring. One's called the Maricopa Bowl, and one's called the Plieto Bowl, and those both have 1 to 2 feet of land subsidence. And based on when the canals were constructed through the present, if there's no change in conditions, the land subsidence is going to continue and impact the facilities. So for the purposes of CASP, this is a graphic that we use just to illustrate what's going on. So basically with the aqueduct, it's primarily a gravity drive system. So basically you have these pools that are approximately 10 miles in length. And between the checks on the 2 ends of the pool, the gradient is between 2 to 4 feet to move the water down the canal. And as the canal is subsiding, you have differential, the canal, the slope changes, and basically it creates what's called a choke point. And basically, as the canal is dropping down, the facility, the water level in the canal continues to move upward, and it, in some cases, reaches the top of the concrete liner. Some cases goes up into the embankment, the earthen embankment materials, which causes problems with respect to slope failures and things like that. Again, land subsidence in the San Joaquin Valley has been well known since the early 1900s. Yeah. The canals are range between about 25 to 35 feet deep, depending on where they're located. So here's a cross section kind of describing, here's what the original system looked like. And you can see, here's the liner right here, and then there's a little bit of an embankment above it. And what happens is as that canal drops down, the ground surface drops and the liner drops, and the water level, when it comes up to the same level it was before, basically reaches the top of the liner. And in some cases, you typically want to operate the canal within the liner section. If it goes up above that, you can, you can have erosion and things like that. So that's not ideal. So you always want to try to keep the water level, well below the liner, just to be safe. So here's what land subsidence looks like with respect to the canal in profile. So this is a cross-sectional profile from the Dos Amigos pumping plant, which would be on this side. This is about milepost 90, and down to the Kettleman City, which is right here. So we've got this basically is a graphic that shows the elevation of the canal at specific benchmarks between 1967 and present, so 2023. And basically what you see here is, so here's the top of it. This was the elevation in 1967. And you can see over time, it's dropping. And this area, we have what's called the Panoche Bowl, which is basically, again, where 1 to 5 foot of subsidence is occurring. So this is the choke point right here. And then adjacent to is the Los Gatos Bowl, 1 to 6 foot of land subsidence. And then this is the aqueduct subsidence profile from Kettleman City to the Edmonston pumping plant, which is at the base of the Tehachapi Mountains. And again, here's the Kern Bowl, which is 2 bowls, 1 to 4 foot of subsidence here. And then here we have the Maricopa and the Plato Bowl with 1 to 2 foot of subsidence. So this is an interesting one. This is some airborne radar that shows some land subsidence occurring between 2013 and 2016. This is a NASA JPL unmanned aerial vehicle that surveyed this multiple times. And you see here, this is check 20. This is at milepost 164. And you see this colored color ramp here, basically showing what appears to be a subside. The land surface in this area is dropping over 10 inches or almost 12 inches here. And then basically between July 2013 and June 2016, you can see that bowl is getting bigger, and it's basically at this particular spot, we have a land subsidence of over 28 inches at this particular location. And this is due to a well field that was been installed in this area to irrigate a new orchard that was just put in. So here's an example of what subsidence looks like at one of the checkpoint, one of the water checks on the edges of the pool. Typically, this is what you want to see, where you've got what's called an air gap here. Basically, this is one example. So this area is essentially no subsidence is occurring here. And at another check in a different location in a subsidence area, you can see there's no gap there. So basically, this facility is not operating properly because the infrastructure is not able to move up anymore. So this is an example of one of the rehab projects where they're going to have to go in and remove this equipment and re-engineer it to raise it up because of the land subsidence that's occurred. So here's an example. Here's an example of where we have a canal section that the water levels rose up into the embankment section and basically caused an erosion problem here. You can also see this overshoot. You can see there's no gap. There's no air gap underneath that. So basically, this would be a rehab project, and this would be an emergency project here. This right here, this is going to have to be repaired by removing that facility and raising it up. So there's a lot of overshoots and bridges and crossings and things that come across the top of the aqueduct. And in those areas, those facilities are going to have to be, when they get to a kind of a critical point, they're going to have to be rehabilitated, which at the extreme would be take that facility out and basically design and build a new facility. So this is another picture of the embankment failure here. This occurred in Pool 25, summertime 2011. So here's another example. This is a pipeline crossing, and then here's a bridge, and you can see that bridge. Normally it would be several feet above the water level, and that would be kind of the normal operating situation. But in this case, it's right. The water level is right at the bridge. So this bridge right here, it doesn't even look like a bridge anymore. Basically, it's going to have to be, it's going to have to be modify or tear it out and basically build a new facility. And then same with this, there's lots of facilities that go over the top of the canal overshoots and pipelines. And when those get to a critical point, those have to be rehabbed as well. And here's a picture of the Delta Mendota Canal, which is not a state facility, but it is on the northern side of the subsidence area. And you can see the bridge, you can see there's little to no gap at the bottom of that. So this is a facility that's got to be rehabbed as well. So my department, DWR, is actively implementing near-term solutions, long-term alternatives to mitigate the risk posed by the impacts of land subsidence. And the CASP program is being implemented to address ongoing subsidence while developing solutions and funding sources to proactively preserve the aqueduct's ability to deliver water for the next 75 years. So we have a number of engineering and various contractors to help us out. On the left-hand side, we've got HDR. There's 13 subcontractors under that contract. In the center one, we've got ESA. There's 10 subcontractors, and then we've got Greg Drilling. They're one of our primary drilling contractors. We're going to be working with the USGS. They're going to be helping us install some monitoring wells and extensometers. So it's a huge effort. Lots of department people working on the project, and we've got lots of subject matter experts from various consulting firms helping as well. As far as the timeline goes, we are right here, 2024. We're a couple of years into the subsidence monitoring program. We're also working on planning, designing, constructing some early implementation projects. So those are some of the projects that are smaller scale projects, ones that are can be done in a shorter time period. But we're also looking at long-term project planning, long-term project implementation that's going to go on for decades. Some of the larger rehab projects, basically where we have to raise some of the embankments, so we can raise the embankments so we can add additional liner up on those sections. That's as you might imagine, that's a significant project over many tens of miles of aqueduct. And then again, some of the check structures, that's a large engineering project that's going to have to be, we're going to have to demo part of the facility and then rebuild a new facility. And then again, same with the bridge raises. Those are significant projects that are going to start probably in the next few years. And then as far as what are some of the novel or enhanced alternatives, we're looking at we're looking at kind of a full spectrum of options. We're looking at potentially a new alignment for certain sections. We're looking at perhaps a parallel canal be constructed in some areas, potentially enlarging certain sections of the canal. But obviously, to do a lot of that, we're going to have to purchase additional adjacent right of way, and then probably include some environmental enhancement. So here's a quick few slides on some geotechnical exploration at pool 17 through 20 for one of the rehab projects. And in this particular location, we've got aqueduct embankment study areas. This is at check 17, about 6 foot of subsidence here. We've got irrigation crossings, or I'm sorry, check 17 is one of the check structures. Irrigation crossings, a bridge crossing here, and then borrow areas in order to get the embankment raise. We've got to characterize the borrow material. Here's the pictures of the work that's going on. We've got full collection, over 5 drill holes along over 20 miles of aqueduct. We're on the chart include the embankments, the check structures, petroleum pipeline crossings, irrigation crossings, borrow areas, and many bridge crossings. And here's a picture of what the geotech investigation looks like adjacent to the bridges. We've got a number of borings. As you get closer to the facility, it goes down to about 100 feet as far as the exploration, and then decreases as you move away from the structure. As far as the bridge goes, we usually have on each embankment, we've got one seismic cone penetration test hole paired with a Holliston auger drill hole with samples collected. And then on the other side, we have another drill hole down to about 100 feet. We usually install a monitoring well there. And then again, on the other side, we've Holliston auger holes that get shallower as you move away from the facility. So now I'm going to transition into the subsidence and groundwater monitoring project. This is a component of the program that's in progress. I mean, it's kind of all hands on deck working on the subsidence and groundwater monitoring project. We've got a data collection plan that is in the process of being implemented. We've got groundwater wells that are being installed, multi-level wells. We've got ground surface elevation devices that are being installed. Those are continuous GPS stations. We've got compaction instrumentation. Those are extensometers. And we've also got climate stations. Those are basically weather stations that are installed along the aqueduct as well. We're also developing standard operating procedures for all the field activities that are occurring. We've got a data management plan, which talks about the storage of the data. The amount of data that's being collected for this program is just massive. It's a huge amount of data and information. And so we need to develop a plan for how are we going to store this? How are we going to share this information? And then how are we going to archive it for future use? And then the neat thing about this program is that with the start of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act in 2014, we've developed a lot of new data viewers, and those data viewers are allowing us to use to share all this information. All this monitoring data that we're collecting is going to be shared through our Sigma data viewer. And again, it'll be once the data has been QA/QC'd and posted, then it'll be accessible to the public for to look at anytime you want. So that's in the spirit of being transparent and sharing all the information with everybody. So here's a map again of the California Aqueduct. This is milepost 90. We've got 24 sites at various mileposts along the aqueduct, and they've basically been selected for installation of groundwater monitoring wells. So at each one of these milepost stations, we're going to have what's called a subsidence monitoring site. And at each one of those sites, we're going to have groundwater monitoring wells, multi-level wells. We're going to have a continuous GPS site. We're going to have a climate monitoring station, and we're also going to have at 8 of these locations, we're going to have extensometers. And the USGS is going to be helping us with these extensometer installations. And here's an example of a traditional extensometer. This is a pipe extensometer. basically it is a borehole that is drilled to, let's say, 1,000 feet, and a steel pipe is cemented into the bottom of that hole. And then basically this pipe comes to the surface. We build our extensometer station and instrumentation at the top, and it allows us to measure the compaction that occurs between the benchmark and the surface. So traditionally, these in these particular facilities, you can only install one at a site. So obviously, if you've got, if you've got subsidence that it's occurring in multiple locations, you can measure the total subsidence, but you don't know exactly where it's occurring. So the in this case, subsidence need to be inferred because you don't have the actual information. So multiple extensometers like this design would need to be installed at each site and in order to obtain the depth specific information, which is both cost and space prohibitive. So through a collaboration between USGS and the Taiwanese government, the program is proposing to test a new technology called a multi-layer compaction well, which is also called a magnetic ring extensometer, and which allows for up to 25 discrete depth measurement points per location, that is amazing considering normally you'd only get one, maybe two at a site, because again, you'd have to have two holes and you might be able to characterize two locations. But again, it takes up a lot of real estate. So if you can have one location that measures multiple sites at depth, that's ideal. So basically how this is installed is they drill one hole and they have a procedure where they install these what are called magnetic rings at specific locations. So after you drill the borehole and you determine where your zones of interest are, you can put these magnetic rings in up to 25 per hole. And then once you're done and you've backfilled the hole with the backfill material, you can run this this probe down there, this electronic probe, and you can do repeat measurements and you can see what the difference in elevation is between the different rings. So you can determine where the subsidence is occurring, which is actually, if that, this seems to be a technology that is working very well in Taiwan, and we're again interested in testing this out in California. So here's just to give you a little more detail on this particular project. This is the Taiwan project, and here's a conceptual model of the study area. These blue areas are the aquifers that they're studying. The brown areas are the aquitards, and basically what's happening is this is a alluvial fan depositional environment, and on the Chauncey River, and they've basically determined that they've got land subsidence occurring in early the middle and distal fan areas. So they've put in these magnetic ring extensometers, and what the data looks like. And so basically the JNES site is up here. So this is on the proximal fan. STES is on the middle fan. YWJS is on the distal fan. And basically, again, by doing repeat surveys, each one of these time series is a different date of the survey. So in this area, in the proximal fan, they're not showing any significant subsidence occurring here through repeat surveys. And then as you get farther towards the coastline, you see these repeat surveys deviating from each other, and that's telling you that there's land subsidence occurring in that area. So it allows you to capture and determine where the land subsidence is occurring at each particular location, depending on what time you survey it. And then same with the YWJS. So basically you have in the middle fan area, we've had over 20 centimeters of compaction in repeat surveys. And then in the the distal fan, we've had over 7 centimeters of subsidence. And if you're interested, this particular paper is Hung et al. 2021 Water Resources Research. So another significant component of the CASP program is the Subsidence and Groundwater Modeling Project. And this is, similar to the the Subsidence Monitoring Project. This is in progress. We have consultants working around the clock, working on these different tasks, review of existing groundwater models, the data that's available and where it's located and how to access it. They're also looking at once we've compiled all the available information, identifying data gaps. And then the last thing we're doing is working on what's called a modeling approach plan. So we're looking at all the models that have been developed, and we're determining the data that can be abstracted from those models. And then we're also looking at potentially using one of those models. There's 2 models that have been developed for the entire Central Valley. One's a USGS model and one's a DWR model. And we're looking at potentially using one of those models as a kind of a base for our model development. But we will be refining the grid spacing horizontal to be more refined along the aqueduct, which is along the western side of the valley. So here's pics of the models that we have evaluated. There's 12 models in total. And again, the CVHM, that's a Central Valley Hydrologic Model. That's a USGS model that covers the entire Central Valley, including up into the Delta and the Sacramento Valley. Our area of focus is the San Joaquin Valley. And then we have the C2V SIM fine grid model, the DWR model that also encompasses the entire Central Valley. And then these other models are more regional or GSA specific, Groundwater Sustainability Agency specific models that have been developed for certain parts of the San Joaquin Valley. So moving forward, there's a ton to do. And again, we're working on this project. It's been going on. The project has been going on for a couple of years. It's going to be extending on for literally decades. As far as the data collection, we've started working on the installing the monitoring wells at specific locations. We haven't started on the extensometers yet. So we're designing interim repairs. We're working on rehab projects. We're implementing the monitoring project. We're also collaborating with the groundwater sustainability agencies to fill monitoring data gaps. We're in the process of developing the subsidence and groundwater model. And again, all the data that we collect from our monitoring is going to be shared on the Sigma data viewer, so it'll be accessible to the public. And that is the end of my presentation. And this is a picture of the California Aqueduct, and you can see this is the ideal scenario where you see there's an air gap underneath. This is what we want. We want our facilities to look like this, not where the water level's right at the base of the structure. So thank you very much for your time. Yes.
Groundwater pumping is the primary cause of subsidence.
Yes.
But don't remove the root cause. Once we stop draining the groundwater.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. So that has to do. Yeah. So basically the fact that we're collecting all this information with respect to land subsidence, collecting water levels and all that, that's great information, and we need that information. But the root cause, the groundwater pumping, if that doesn't change or decrease, then we're going to be collecting a lot of data showing the continued subsidence. So basically what's happening is that part of the situation is being handled through the Sustainable Groundwater Management Program. That's called SIGMA, and that was a law that came into being in 2014, began to be implemented in 2015. So basically, we're on our 10th year of SIGMA implementation, and basically, what's happening there is we have all the high priority groundwater basins in the state are being monitored by the local GSAs, groundwater sustainability agencies. And those agencies are working together with their water districts within their GSA and their adjacent water districts. And they're basically monitoring the groundwater, evaluating the issues, and ultimately the goal is over the course of 20 years. So from about 2020 through 2040, the goal is to bring the groundwater basins into balance as far as extraction and recharge. Because right now in a lot of the basins, there's more being extracted, so the basin water levels are dropping. It's causing all sorts of dry wells, land subsidence, water quality problems, all sorts of issues. So basically the root cause that you're talking about is going to be handled over time. And basically what that means is that there's going to be certain areas that are experiencing significant groundwater level declines. Those areas are going to have to be there. The bottom line is you can either increase the supply of water, or you can decrease the demand. So basically, decreasing the demand is going to have to occur. So that means, there's certain parts of the San Joaquin Valley that are not going to be used for ag eventually because of it's just there's so much, it's overdeveloped basically. So the root cause problem that will hopefully be handled at the local level over time over the next 20 or so years. But the department is actively, they have to submit, the GSAs have to submit annual reports, and then we do 5-year management plan reviews. And if the data they're collecting and the projects they're implementing are solving the problem based on the monitoring data, then everything's good. But if it's not, then they will have to be more aggressive. Yes. Yep.
What's the advantage?
Okay. Well, it allows you, the key thing is that it allows you to determine in very high resolution where your land subsidence is occurring versus just saying, like, if it's at your benchmark's at 1,000 feet and you have the ground surface, it's occurring between those 2 points. And then if you wanted to know what it was happening between it somewhere else, you'd have to install another extensometer at a different depth. So it allows you to, in one location, have many depth discrete measurement points. And so basically it's kind of like it's kind of like your ideal extensometer where you can measure you can get lots of information in one location versus compared to the stratigraphy. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Exactly. You could determine, right? So it basically allows you to better define where the problem area is. If the problem area is, if you don't know exactly where it is, and you've got all these measurements, you can determine where the problem is, and you can go, okay, the pumping is occurring, the problematic pumping is occurring at depth, and a shallow area is fine. And you just continue to monitor that. But again, you do those repeat surveys and you can see how things are changing. So it allows you to, figure out where the problem is and then monitor that over time. So again, it's a new technique that's been used extensively in overseas. And if we can get it to work see it's producing repeatable results in California, then that's going to be a huge improvement in our ability to use extensometers and study these areas. Yep.
Did talk about droughts and drought subsidence interest during the periods. The second question is, where you have choke points, how much of a reduction of flow are you getting into the aquifer, and how much of a concern is that for folks like the water districts in LA?
Yeah, so basically the reductions in conveyance capacity along the aqueduct ranges from about 20 to 50% in some of those locations. And again, that's basically been occurring over, since before the aqueduct was installed, we knew about the land subsidence. So we actually built some additional freeboard and additional conveyance capacity into some of the certain sections. But basically the, over time, if the, the groundwater pumping doesn't change, if the groundwater pumping doesn't improve, or the groundwater pumping doesn't decrease over time, the land subsidence is going to continue, and that is going to make the situation worse. So but in the meantime, the aqueducts are being rehabilitated over time, and just like you said with the droughts, it's like when we have drought periods, which are pretty common in California and the West Coast, you have less surface water, and less surface water moving down the conveyance basically forces the farmers who've planted, in a lot of cases they've planted permanent crops that need to be watered every year. They can't be fallowed, and it forces them to, in order to protect their investment, they have to turn their groundwater pumps on. So instead of just using the groundwater pumps during the dry periods and not using them during the rest of the year, basically, in a lot of cases, they're using both surface water and groundwater all the time. So the groundwater system never gets a break. Sure. Yes.
What's the size of the staff and potential of your program? Are you worried about the state budget these days?
So yeah, budget is always a concern. We're always trying to do the most work we can with the existing funding. But with the state water project, it has multiple funding sources. We've got the actual state water contractors. They provide a significant portion of the funding for the project. And then we've got the central portion of the California Aqueduct is a joint use facility with the Central Valley Project. So the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation is they helped construct and fund the aqueduct. So basically, we have some funding sources through the federal government, and then a small portion of the funding would come from the general fund. So as far as consulting staff, I showed you that chart that showed that one slide that talked about the consultants. We've got literally dozens of consultants of different specialties working on the project. These are multi-year, multi-million-dollar engineering and contracts. And then as far as state employees, we've literally got we have probably at least 50 staff right now that are working on the project, from management level all the way down to the field staff. And then again, if necessary, we have if we need additional staffing, we can tap into our contractors.
Get one more round of applause.
Northern California Geological Society coffee cup here.
Ah.
Thank you very much for speaking tonight.
Thank you.
And then next month, we have March 27th, Jackson Murray from the Geological Survey. We're going to be talking about earthquake source characterization using the shape alert early warning system. And that should be a great talk. So please come back next month. And again, Chris, if anything, more questions, those could help us put the chairs away. We have time to help us stack them. That'd be great. And have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Oh, those. I think the purpose of that is a lot of times, sometimes people will fish and get in the aqueduct, and basically that's to keep them. Well, it's to keep they're not supposed to go in that area, so it's kind of like a barrier. How you doing?
Hi, it's nice to see you. Great talk. So as far as you didn't mention much about climate.
Yeah.
Climate modeling. I went to a lecture years ago. Lawrence Livermore. We talked about 20 years time, Northern California like LA. That was 2000. So it's not quite there, but you see it's ultra dry here.
Yes.
LA's looking up for like Baja now, it's a idea. So how's that factored into your forecasting with consumption on the inside?
Yeah, so
Recharge side
so as far as the that would go into the modeling project. So in addition to the subsidence and groundwater modeling project, a component of that is integrating in and bringing in the climate modeling and the different scenarios. So once the model is